This is WWE superstar Drew McIntyre, and you're listening to the WWE Podcast.
The champ is the one that everybody wants, me. It's going to WrestleMania. Claymore! Austin 316 says I just whipped your ass. This is my iron. You're going to acknowledge me.
Welcome to the current state of WWE, everybody, and we've got Anthony DeMarco back with us this week, and hey, we've got a couple things to talk about as we get into Crown Jewel. We're going to talk about two things that are familiar topics here on this show, but really, as Anthony and I were talking off the air here, seem to be the biggest items going on, and we want to cover the biggest items going on in WWE. And Anthony, welcome to the show. I think we're going to talk about Bray Wyatt and the Bloodline as we normally do, but with some new updates. So how you doing, man?
Doing well, buddy. I think we're both nursing something here. That's why I missed my my retro show this week, trying to recover over the weekend, but feeling better now. But I feel that mostly right now in WWE, things are primarily in a holding pattern as they're trying to get through Crown Jewel, as obviously they're just trying to book the main level matches here. Like, there's two matches here, arguably the two biggest matches on the show, in Brock versus Lashley and Roman versus Logan Paul, that are just there as one-offs. Obviously, none of them are going to be factors in the long-term storytelling. And I think you've kind of seen that a lot in the product, specifically on Monday Night Raw, that the last two Raws, obviously we haven't seen it tonight, have been not bad by any stretch, but not up to par as to where we've been accustomed to under the Triple H regime, one of which probably being because Road Dogg was overseeing it with Triple H on the sideline of COVID. But I mean, that's kind of like what things are with Crown Jewel every time it comes around, or whatever you may call whatever pay-per-view they've had there. I think they've had like the Super Royal Rumble or whatever that was called. So things are in a holding pattern, but I think the two things that we're seeing in terms of the long-term storytelling are the Bloodline's development away from Logan Paul, and obviously the Bray Wyatt storyline unfolding each and every SmackDown.
Yeah, let's start with the Bloodline. I mean, this past week we saw a very critically acclaimed segment that opened the show, and I mean, it came after a loss with Sami Zayn and Jey Uso, but it came with a lot of fanfare. You're noticing the Bloodline week by week getting more and more cheers, and that's a side topic I want to ask you about after this. But specifically with this segment, Sami Zayn breaks down Jey and breaks down Roman Reigns, and says that Jey isn't Ucey enough, and it broke Roman completely. And he tried to play it off. Jey tried to play it off. It was just I don't know what is so funny about that. It's maybe Sammy why he says it and how he says it. He's like the outsider trying to fit into the cool group at school, and it's working. You and I have praised this every time that we talk about Sami Zayn being just such a breath of fresh air in a group that was getting a little monotonous and stale. That he has completely reinvigorated this group in a way that I think is turning the entire group babyface. That's my assessment, especially based on the crowd reaction and the Sami Zayn chants, and really not hearing any boos from Roman Reigns, that certainly not overshadowing the cheers for him. So, but this segment was good. Jey and Sami hash it out. And beyond the funny segment, we also got a part where Jey said, "I don't give a damn what the tribal chief says." And that moment that Roman looked up at the camera, and that look he gave was just perfectly done from a production standpoint, zooming in on his face. The expression on Roman's face was just professionally done. I mean, it was great. I mean, it's got to turn into a meme at some point. It's got to be, right? Like, Roman's head popping up and the zoom in and the look on his face is perfect. So what did you make of this whole segment?
I found it brilliant from top to bottom. I even found it really awesome that after Solo and Sammy lost, and Sammy's like bickering in the ring with Jey, and then Jey and Jimmy go face to face, and then all of the sudden, like, Roman's music hits, and you just see all of their stomachs just sink into them, and you have the zoom in of all of their faces petrified that now Roman's here. And I think that Wade Barrett mentioned it, that like now Daddy showed up, and now the kids have to like kind of deal with the consequences of what they've done. And it really sold home the fact of how important Roman is. And look, we've come on here and we've complained and we've critiqued that they've kind of driven it far too much. The Roman Reigns storyline, the Bloodline storyline, that's too much all the time. But at the same time, I think what Triple H and the new creative has done with it is breathe new life into it. That's not always about Roman. Roman is there and he is the focal point and he is the tribal chief and he is the undisputed champion. But there's also other underlying storylines. There's sub storylines that we can now see him oversee, and he doesn't always have to be at the forefront. And I think that the whole production of this segment was brilliant. And like you said, when Jay says, I don't give a damn what the tribal chief says, and his face shoots up, and I don't know about you, but do you not find that Roman, he aged a lot, but not in a bad way necessarily? Like he almost looks more like in charge. Have you noticed that at all?
It's so funny you mentioned that. I don't know what it was. It's maybe that he's growing his beard out a little fuller, or that he's losing weight, or I don't know what it is, but he has looked like he's aged, but in kind of like a fine wine. And I don't mean that in like I think he's so like, I just mean that he just looks like a boss. He looks like he should be the leader of a group. He looks like he's kind of come full circle as to what they envisioned Roman being after this 2 years. Yeah, he does. He looks like he's aged, but in a good way. So I'm with you. Yeah, that's something. I'm glad you pointed that out.
Yeah, like he looks legitimate, and like you said, he's growing his beard out, and there's a bit of gray in it, but again, not a bad way. And it's just the visual of Roman Reigns right now, like you said, not in a like, oh, he's so attractive type of way, although my girlfriend did say that, so obviously that is a thing. Mm-hmm. But it's in a way that like it's legitimized himself as the leader of that group and the character that he's playing. And it's crazy that just a few months ago, I was complaining all the time that there was too much Roman all the time. And while I still feel that he shouldn't be holding 2 championships and keeping Raw hostage in a lot of ways, I think that the direction they've taken the Bloodline has saved it. And at least now when I see the Bloodline, I'm stoked to see them. I'm happy to see them. I like seeing Roman. And it's not always like, oh, here we go. He's going to come out, say, like, acknowledge me, blah, 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 blah. Now we know it's something different. And obviously the wrinkle of Sami Zayn, like this guy is an all-star right now. He is honestly the story of 2022. You know that there's a long-term payoff coming here. Like I think it's bound to happen that the Bloodline turns on him and then Kevin Owens gets involved. But the long roundabout route that they're taking to get here is just absolutely brilliant. And it's another testament to Triple H. Like, look, there's been some duds under Triple H. I'm not saying that's all been sunshine and roses. But at this point, I think that specifically with the Bloodline, he's taken something that was becoming very stale, something that was becoming very mundane and redundant, and turned it into almost like a brand new storyline. Like the Bloodline feels nothing like it did a year ago at this point.
And that's just with one added element. And now you have Solo Sikoa, but Solo Sikoa is just an extension of what that personality of the Bloodline already was. A good extension, but nothing different. Sami Zayn is the X factor here. He is the reason that we feel the way we do. If Sami Zayn wasn't here, it might be the same thing that we've been complaining about for months and months, almost years now, of the Bloodline coming out there and just saying exactly what you said. But now that you have Sami Zayn in here, I do wonder if this was kind of a happy accident, or just they caught lightning in a bottle with Sami, because when he originally was trying to get involved with his group, he was just kind of, he was still a heel. People still didn't like him. They kind of found him annoying, and that, the Bloodline is way bigger than he is. That's how I felt, and we knew how good of a talent Sami was, but you looked at it and you said, well, I don't know if this is really going to work. They'll probably just, end up kicking his ass and he'll go do something else. Well, that's not what happened. I really don't know if they designed this from the beginning and envisioned this with Sami Zayn. Do you think that they kind of stumbled into this, or do you think this was by design that it would be this successful with Sami?
Well, I'm trying to think, was Sami involved with the Bloodline when Vince McMahon was still in charge? That's what I'm trying to piece together here. Like, when did he start? Do you remember at all when he started getting involved with the Bloodline?
I want to say it was when Vince was there. It's been quite a while since he's been trying to infiltrate that group.
So because Vince started it, and look, again, like you've said a bunch, but I don't want to beat the drum that everything Vince touched was bad. But I do feel like Vince, particularly with the Bloodline, was all about immediate payoffs. It seemed that with Roman Reigns, it was always kind of like on to the next, on to the next, on to the next, on to the next. Like there wasn't a lot of like long-term matches that he would have, like multi-matches aside from Brock Lesnar, of course. But with this particular thing is that it's like Triple H came in and he said, and obviously Sami Zayn was in NXT with Triple H, a former NXT champion and all that. And Triple H probably said to himself and the creative team, like, look, if we play this right, we could have gold on our hands. And obviously you have the Kevin Owens factor kind of lurking in the background. And obviously KO has not been on TV in a lot of weeks. And obviously that plan has been shelved for a bit. I've seen reports that I don't think it's not going to happen at all. I just think that maybe they're putting on the back burner, which probably isn't a bad thing, because this way, if you bring him back and start accelerating a KO integration into the storyline, it's probably something around Royal Rumble, WrestleMania time. So I just think what Triple H has done here is taken something that was probably originally supposed to be an immediate payoff or a joking thing where Sami Zayn just got his ass kicked in short order by the Bloodline and saw the true value that he could bring. Because let's be honest, Sami Zayn's a good wrestler. He's an amazing promo. Like, he's a very good performer. He's a damn good wrestler, and that's what people forget. But he also has an inherent knack and a natural ability to make people laugh. He's just a funny guy. And obviously I'm a bit biased because he's from Montreal, and it's good to see a great Shane New, as we call them, you know, excelling in the big world. But I mean, it's just something that fell into their lap, I think, and I think Triple H completely took advantage of it.
And what's hilarious is that Roman Reigns is defending his Undisputed Championship in just a matter of days, and they barely mention Logan Paul at all. I mean, and I know why they didn't, and they did. I think they did once, and that was when they were all in ring, and Logan Paul got booed. I mean, just out of the building, just by the mention of his name, which is smart, not bringing them there, because WWE knows, and Logan Paul has to know that they are going to just totally tear him apart. Limb from limb from a reaction standpoint. But they did mention him backstage after that segment with Paul Heyman and Roman Reigns, and Paul told, hey, Roman, you may want to take a look at this, and it was having Logan Paul in the ring and, like, boxing with random people or whatever, and Roman dismissed it. But the narrative that they're pushing, I think, is the only narrative they can push, and I think it's a smart one. That, okay, we know he's not as good of a wrestler, he may not be as good of a fighter, but he doesn't need to be that hit the one lucky punch. That's essentially all you can live on for people to actually care about this match. Of, well, that's kind of true. Like, he's had 2 matches. He's not really doing anything on a week to week basis. And they still feel like he's kind of this social media D-bag star coming in and getting handed opportunities, but it only takes that one lucky punch. So I think for most people that are looking at this pay-per-view and looking at this match, know the outcome. But for me, and I said this on my show yesterday for the Weekend Review, that I'm looking for them to make me believe for that 1 or 2 moments, 1 or 2 seconds, like, oh my God, wait a minute, he actually did hit the lucky punch, but there's no referee, or something like that, where, there was that moment where, okay, this is actually plausible. He could win here. I didn't think they'd do this. That's the moment I want to get, just so that I'm halfway interested in this match, because Logan Paul's super athletic. I'm not worried about the match quality. I don't think anybody's worried about match quality. They're just simply feeling like Logan Paul doesn't deserve this spot.
And, well, that's exactly it. And like we talked about earlier in the show, it's because Crown Jewel primarily each and every year is planned for big time one-off matches. Like you've said numerous times, it's literally put together just to appease the Prince of Saudi Arabia because they throw obscene amounts of money at the WWE. And I understand that. From a monetary perspective, from a pure business perspective, WWE would be absolutely foolish not to take advantage of it. But from a fan, or I don't want to say like a typical fan, but from a North American fan point of view, let's put it like that, or European fan who kind of really appreciates like congruity and long-term storytelling and stuff that makes sense, nobody really wants to see Logan Paul versus Roman Reigns in the Undisputed Championship main event match. And even kind of Brock versus Lashley. Like, look, I think it's going to be a much better match than we saw at the Royal Rumble last year. And I saw a clip of them having another pull-apart brawl tonight on Monday Night Raw, which I mean, I guess they're just trying to fast track the storyline. They're trying to develop it in a matter of weeks because they just have to get to it at Crown Jewel. But like, it's a lot of matches that are just there for like, I guess, pop value, like kind of like pop off the card. Like even Omos versus Braun Strowman. It's just like, okay, two massive guys, it's going to be a draw. Like it almost feels like a boxing card. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Like where there's not a lot of storytelling behind it. And look, I get it. Like if I was Triple H, if I was Nick Khan, if I was Stephanie McMahon, I would do the exact same thing because of the obscene amounts of money they make. But it still always feels that every time we get to this point in the year that they're going to Saudi Arabia for Crown Jewel, we always have to go through like this holding pattern where they just book these big time matches that look like that on paper, but we know don't make that much sense. And we know that in the long term grand scheme of things, they're not going to play a massive part in the storytelling.
Yeah, this is to me like the reference I made last night also was like Insurrection. Like the pay-per-view of Insurrection that in the United States and anywhere outside of the UK didn't really see Insurrection. It was a pay-per-view that was done many years ago that it was inconsequential to the current storylines going on in North America, as you said. And while this pay-per-view does have consequences, for a lot of people they are tuning out because of political beliefs or the moral implications of Saudi Arabia's government that they disagree with. You know, there's a lot of reasons why people don't are not going to watch this event. But the fact is that I think some things are going to come out of this. But if there's a lot of one-offs, then you can end the program there and you can start whatever you want to Survivor Series on the following show. So I think that's what they're going to do here. I don't think Omos and Braun Strowman are going to hang out for a while. It's just kind of a one-off for now. And with Logan Paul and Roman, absolutely a one-off. And so this comes to my second question with the Bloodline, and then we'll finish up with Bray here, is do you think that this group is officially babyface? I mean, like, I don't know if it's by design, but at this point, I don't know how you can really boo the Bloodline. They're entertaining as hell. Sami Zayn has flipped the entire group, essentially. Everybody's playing their part perfectly. Everybody brings something to the table. And if they are babyface, well, what do they do moving forward? Are they just going to not bring any babyfaces to face Rome? Like, this is a weird thing to have happen right now. So what's your take?
I think that they're going to temporarily become babyface, but I think eventually they're going to have a bad bloody beatdown on Sami Zayn and flip them back heel, because I do think that eventually they are going to get to Bray Wyatt versus Roman Reigns, because it is just too big of a program not to have. Like that is a huge money making storyline. Like, you know, I remember thinking that, like, you know, Drew McIntyre was the only guy that had enough clout to really step up to Roman Reigns and be a legitimate guy to dethrone him. But now, and look, there are things about the Bray Wyatt stuff that I'm not a huge fan of, and we'll get to that. But there's no denying how over he is with the crowd and how much people just absolutely want this guy to be pushed to the moon. And I do think that internally they've listed him as a babyface on SmackDown, Bray Wyatt, that is. And I think because they eventually are going to get to Bray versus Roman, eventually the Bloodline is going to turn back heel. They just have to.
And Sami Zayn could be the one that does. He not only is the one to cause them to turn babyface, the crowd cheering them right now, but he's going to be the reason why they boo the Bloodline. Because as you said, I do believe that there'll be a story driven by Roman realizing that blood is thicker than water and that Sami Zayn really isn't a part of the Bloodline. How can you be a part of the Bloodline when you don't have, you know, blood of our family? You know, like there's a way to absolutely turn Roman back to this nasty, mean, you know, overbearing SOB. It could easily happen, but as it stands right now, it's kind of a much more lighthearted version of the Bloodline that I think a lot of people are loving. It was the segment of the week for me, and it wasn't a wrestling match, obviously. So this was so much fun to watch, and you know they're not going to produce 5-star segments like this every week, but at least you know now what they're capable of, and I think it has got a lot of people on board, and they're selling a crap ton of merchandise out of it. So I'm sure they're going to squeeze everything they can out of it as well. So let's move on to Bray Wyatt. You know, this past week he comes on and starts cutting his more Bray Wyatt-ish, I'm really me, this is just me promo. And it's interesting because Bray Wyatt is a wrestler. He's a wrestling character playing a non-character even though he's in character. It's weird.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, and I can't. I'm not trying to be confusing, but if you know what I mean, like he's playing a character, but he's also trying to play himself, but not look like he is. It's very deep, even though he's coming out as just quote unquote Bray Wyatt. And I really think that it's still intriguing to watch. There's no right now hocus pocus with just Bray himself. He feels like a much more, as we alluded to with Roman, a more of an adult character with just him. He feels older, and I like that. He looks older. He's filling out his beard. Maybe that's the key. Just fill out your beard, and you know, maybe I'm onto something. But with Bray, he just feels like a more complete character right now. At least just with himself, he feels more mature. It's like he's really in a groove with who and what he is. But now we get this character that interrupts him again and tells him, "This is not who you are. I know who you really are." It's Uncle Howdy. And I will say this. I am really of the hope that it is not Bray Wyatt himself as, again, some alter ego like The Fiend was. I really hope it is another character like a Bo Dallas or whoever else people are speculating about. I don't know what to make of this character. They finally introduced another person, quote unquote, with Uncle Howdy. But I don't know. Maybe you have a different perspective on this, and maybe you're looking forward to this being some kind of schizophrenic Three Faces of Foley type deal. I hope it's not, personally, but what did you take on this?
It's so weird. I think you described it as like peeling back an onion with Bray Wyatt, that there's just so many layers to everything to do with this guy that it's really hard to grasp it all at one time. But the one thing I'll say about it is that it leaves me wanting more and so intrigued each and every week, which is what you want, right? And the Uncle Howdy stuff, just to confirm, he is the guy that was behind that mask. That is supposed to be Uncle Howdy, correct?
I believe so, yes.
So, and clearly Uncle Howdy's face is another mask, which is, and like, I feel like that's a storyline to the layers part, that there's so many layers. It's so ridiculous. But I do think it probably is a Bo Dallas, like his brother kind of trying to expose him as a bad guy type of thing. I don't think it's a schizophrenic part of him, but it's like, I don't really like the hocus pocus stuff, and obviously this is trending in that direction. I've never been a fan of it. It's one of the reasons why I was never a mega fan of The Undertaker, but I'm still so damn intrigued by it. And for casual fans, like, obviously, like, my girlfriend primarily watches wrestling with me just to make me happy because she's a nice person, but she legitimately wants to see the Bray Wyatt segment each and every week. And look, to be honest, this is the entertainment part of wrestling. Like, Bray Wyatt has not been in a wrestling match since he debuted. And to be honest, I think we may wait another month or two before we see him in a match, maybe even longer. But it's just such brilliant storytelling that I can't look away. Like, even if I don't necessarily like what's going on, and like I have thought, like, okay, is it just him with 6 different personalities for the Wyatt 6? Is Uncle Howdy actually himself, like the movie Split back in a few years ago? But either way it is, even if I know I may not ultimately like the outcome, I'm still just so intrigued by it. It's something you really can't stop watching in a lot of ways.
That's probably the best way to put it. Even if you're not a fan of the hocus pocus stuff, and I am to an extent, I'm for it if they can do it in a professional way that doesn't make it look like it's special effects, and that it's believable for the person that you're trying to use it for. And I think Bray Wyatt fits that. And I think right now you have Bray Wyatt in a good position. Every word that he says is so carefully crafted, and that's the thing that's so crazy about him. And the Uncle Howdy character did allude that, okay, yeah, you may not be wearing a physical mask, but you're like basically saying you are still wearing a mask. This is not really you, referring to a metaphorical mask, that he's still not being real with us. So whoever this is, assuming it's not Bray himself, because I would imagine he can have a match with himself, that would be bizarre. You know what I mean? Like, so I don't know if this is his opponent or an ally. We don't know much of anything yet. This is all speculation. But the metaphorical mask deal is what Uncle Howdy was referencing, that he's not really being real with us on who he says he is now. So it's great character development. They're going slow with it, and you and I talked about this a week or two ago, that we like how they're not just throwing him into a program with wrestler X, whoever it may be. As great as Roman and him may be, I'm glad they didn't just throw him in there. There's time for that. It's all character development, all about Bray Wyatt and where he is and questions we have. I really have no complaints about this yet, unless it goes off the rails and you start seeing Lily get involved or something ridiculous. I don't have any complaints, and every week it leaves you with questions, and you're listening to every damn word that he says. I mean, you're not tuning anything out, because you know everything he says has some kind of symbolic meaning or deep-seated questions that you're going to have. So I love it. I mean, I have no complaints, and it's going to really be interesting when he finally gets involved physically with somebody, who that person could be. We all know Roman's on the target list at some point, maybe WrestleMania or wherever. But I really don't have any complaints about this. And did I ask you last time who you think his first opponent's going to be? Maybe I did. If I did, I forgot.
No, you didn't. Bray Wyatt, that is, right?
Yes, Bray Wyatt. Who was first? Yeah, in ring.
Honestly, I imagine, my guess is that it's Bo Dallas. He did officially re-sign with WWE, if I'm not mistaken. So I think it will be Bo Dallas. He hasn't hinted at anyone on the roster yet. That's my best guess. But I think that's the thing I like about it, because I am a guy who I like unpredictability a lot. If it makes sense, it doesn't always have to be unpredictable. But I think that this is a case where I have no idea where the F they're going with this, to be honest, because every week it's they ask who he's babyface, but then you have Uncle Howdy, who's clearly a heel. And my guess is Bo Dallas, just because it's low-hanging fruit in a lot of ways. But they've left me completely clueless as to where the original destination is going to be, or any destination is going to be with this, just because I don't know what the hell is going on with a lot of this, which is a good thing in this case.
Yeah, no. When you have more questions than answers, that's kind of the motto of how you know it's one of the telltale signs it's a good story, is that you don't know, you know less than you do know. So the things you don't know outweigh the things you do know, and that's a good thing, especially with how long this storyline is going to be. And I think we covered that. I personally believe that Bray Wyatt's thought out over a year of where he wants to go, and maybe not week by week of what I want to say detail wise, but just big picture. I'm sure that Triple H, and especially Wyndham, Bray Wyatt, has thought out, hey, I want to be here. Kind of like mile markers. Okay, Survivor Series, I want to be here. Rumble, I want to be here. Mania, bum, 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 all the way maybe to next year's WrestleMania. And, Bray Wyatt is, I think, the number one candidate to take the belt off of Roman. I don't want it The Rock. You and I both don't want Cody Rhodes. I think Bray Wyatt is the number one far and away candidate. I guess Drew is possible. But given how, the last interaction went with Roman, I don't think that he's anywhere close to being back into the title picture as of now. So I don't know. Do you think right now, when you look at the entire roster, including NXT, of potential call-ups, do you think Bray Wyatt is the number one guy that you would look to be the one to dethrone Roman Reigns?
I would have to. Obviously, a lot of people will point to Cody Rhodes, which you and I are not on board with. But aside from that, who is it? Even Drew, man. I like Drew McIntyre a lot. I've said that numerous times, but I feel after that loss to Roman at Clash at the Castle, and now he's in the program with Karrion Kross, I just feel he's lost in obscurity a bit. And obviously Seth Rollins is doing his thing on Monday Night Raw as the U.S. champion. Matt Riddle has already lost to Roman Reigns. I just don't know who else it could be. Besides Cody, who I really am against, and Bray Wyatt, who else is a guy? Unless you try and bring up Braun Breaker and do a long-term story with him. But if you bring up Braun Breaker, that means that you're going to have Roman as champ for probably at least another year, because Braun Breaker still is a full-time NXT guy, and you'd have to give him some time on the main roster to develop himself, for those who don't watch NXT like you and myself. So, I think it would have to be Bray Wyatt or Cody Rhodes right now. And just to touch a bit on Drew McIntyre, how lost does he feel right now?
I've seen worse. Okay, I've seen worse with Drew McIntyre for a while. I remember he was randomly teaming with the New Day. He had no direction. So there have been worse times in his career I could point to, even over the last year. But yeah, right now he's kind of He caused a car accident with Karrion Kross and then attacks Karrion Kross after the car accident. And then, he continues to get beat down by Karrion, although this week he didn't even show up. I think Karrion Kross choked out whoever his opponent was on Raw, and Scarlett was... By the way, I love Scarlett. Scarlett and Karrion Kross are, I think, a nice combination. They have a nice chemistry together. But, Drew McIntyre, he doesn't... I wouldn't say... To me, I don't think he's lost, but I also don't think he's on a good path. Like, I think he's on a path that leads him to here and there and everywhere with no, I guess, just definitive destination that I think should land him a championship. But right now it doesn't look like that. He's just kind of feuding with those like mid-high tier heels. And he's not right now in a program that people aren't showing up to the arena to see Drew McIntyre. He's not the headline guy right now, if that's what you're asking. But I don't think he's lost, in short to your question. I just think he's not on a great path if you're looking for him to be champion.
Yeah, I guess I said lost because I just think of where he was during the pandemic and how he helped really guide WWE through the pandemic, especially with Roman away, and Braun was the Universal Champion on SmackDown, which was, underwhelming, but I understand they were kind of in a pinch with Roman being away from the product at that point. I just guess I was waiting for Drew to get back to that level that he was during the pandemic era, and it feels like, not that I guess you're right, he's not technically lost, but I just feel like he's getting farther and farther away from potentially getting back to where he was in 2020.
Yeah, that's gonna be a tough thing to get back to, and what stinks for Drew is that he was that guy that was in front of nobody, that was the face of the company for a while, and he carried the company very respectably in that time frame that was very difficult during the 18 months of not being in front of crowds. And I really feel for the guy of not being able to ever finally have his damn moment in front of an audience, and it was right there for the taking in front of his quote unquote hometown audience in Wales. But it's going to be hard for him to get back there. I don't think it's impossible. At the same time, Drew McIntyre is not exactly young right now. I mean, he's my age, but in professional sports, it's you're kind of getting elderly. I mean, in a way, because Drew McIntyre, he's in great shape, but I don't know how much longer he's going to go. Where WWE could say, hey, it's not his time, it's not his year, but in the next 2 to 5 years, we'll give him his run. It's like, well, Drew's not exactly a 25-year-old upstart, so I don't know. I'm not saying do or die for Drew, but I think he'll finally get his moment at some point. He just has the worst luck in the world, I got to say.
It's a very it's a tough situation for Drew, and like you said, like he debuted in wrestling 15 years ago. Like he's not a spring chicken, and it does feel like eventually he's going to get passed by, and I think that he has already gotten passed by in a lot of ways with Bray Wyatt, because look, they don't have a ton of baby faces, young baby faces as well in WWE, but I mean, it just doesn't feel like he's ever going to get back at that level that he was in 2020, and it sucks that he only got there when there's nobody in the crowd.
The one good thing he has working for him is Triple H, who I think understands what the crowd wants a little bit more than Vince did, at least in Vince's later stages. I'm not saying Vince is, like you said, not all crap, because that's kind of like easy thing to do that now Vince is gone, everything he did was garbage, and it's not true. Vince gave us some of the best storylines in WWE history, and he is the reason that we are all here right now. But in his later stages, I think with just simply being older, even the God-defeating Vince McMahon could not outweigh and outrun the Father Time. I mean, Father Time is undefeated, right? Like, Father Time has never been beaten. Even Vince McMahon can't beat Father Time. So that's, I think, what it was, on top of the fact that eventually you just run out of ideas, and why should everything be filtered through the same guy for 40 years? You're eventually going to get things that are not great continuing to pop up. But yeah, I think that's one good thing that Drew has working for him, is Triple H seems to be a little more in tune, a little more responsive, and willing to do and try things that Vince maybe wasn't. So, hey, I know that this past week, guys, you weren't able to hear a brand new episode of Rivalries, but I was able to repost one of the better ones, I thought, and also, not that you have any bad shows, but it was a longer one, and I wanted to also give you guys a really headlining one of Hulk Hogan versus The Rock It originally aired on January 15th of 2021. I put that out there this week in place of a brand new show, but do you have any ideas this week? You don't have to give us any clues, but do you have any ideas of right now in your head of what you want to do this week for Rivalries?
Yeah, well, I had something lined up actually, and I won't tell you exactly what it is, but I will be covering a WrestleMania, and it's one that I think that is not talked about enough, but was actually low-key a very cool WrestleMania, and it was just an overall very good WrestleMania, but something that we don't talk about a lot. And it is in the, I'm not even going to tell you what era it is. It's a WrestleMania, and it's one that I find is very, very underrated.
That's okay. All right, so there's your hint, guys, for this week's Retro. I said Rivalries. I posted a Rivalries, but it's Retro. So Retro is coming brand new this coming Friday. Hopefully, guys, I feel like I'm as Anthony started the show, I'm under the weather a little bit, but hopefully it doesn't progress. It regresses. We'll have to see. But yeah, so check that out. Rivalries was posted yesterday, but you guys can check out a brand new Retro this coming Friday. Any final thoughts on anything going on in WWE and anything else you wanted to mention before we wrap it up?
I guess the only thing I would say is that I'm pretty excited to see what they do with the Viking Raiders when they come back. I've liked the vignette so far.
Agreed. And by the way, who is that? Who's the girl with them? Is that Sarah Logan?
I'm going to venture a guess that it's Sarah Logan.
Okay.
I just think it makes too much sense.
Yeah. Oh God. Yeah. And boy, I mean, you talk going from like irrelevance for 5 years to actually doing something important. I mean, really, like Sarah Logan is about as interesting as, the book on my shelf. It's just, like, she just never had anything. But I think that's a perfect fit if that is indeed Sarah Logan. And the vignettes have been very good. I mean, like almost movie quality trailers to some degree of what they've done. It's been really nice to see what they did. And before that, they actually they added a level of violence to their
viciousness.
Group. Yeah, the vicious. Yeah, that's right, viciousness. So yeah, I'm very excited to see them come back. And yeah, agreed. So. All right. Well, I think that wraps it up for this week in the current state of WWE. And hope you feel better. And we will be chatting next week.
Yeah, man. Looking forward to it. Take care of that cold.
Yeah, thanks. Bye.
Bye.
Thanks for listening to the WWE Podcast. Don't forget to subscribe on your favorite podcast app so you don't miss a show, or head to WWEpodcast.com. And for all of these shows ad-free, head over to patreon.com/WWE Podcast. Until then, we'll see you next time.